So, welcome on board. I think that my job is done. Actually, what I've checked today with my colleague Chris Kirby here at Internal Education, I asked him, Chris, what do you call these people who will appear before the headliners of the show? Well, he said that they're usually called the supporting band, right, or the supporting team. So what other reason why I am here is just to warm you up a bit, to let you all catch up with the man on stage. Please welcome Vaughan Jones here with his wonderful presentation exclusively for the teachers of Ukraine. Vaughan, can you hear me? Can you please join us here?
Yes, I can join you.
Okay, and
Hello,
here
everyone.
he comes. Okay,
In
Vaughan, enjoy it. Guys, enjoy it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was a very low-tech solution to stopping me being seen at the beginning, but this is a very high-tech presentation as I'm coming to you from the middle of England. And today I want to talk to you about personalisation, which is an extremely important part or feature of all of the focus materials, both the first edition and even more so maybe in the second edition. Can I first thank Gennady very much for that very wholesome and very appreciative introduction. And indeed, thank Pearson for inviting us to do these webinars, along with their very, very good partners in Ukraine, Internal, who we work very, very well with. I would absolutely love to be with you in person, obviously. I've always enjoyed my visits to Ukraine very much, everything about it. But sadly, we are limited to this kind of interaction for the moment. And indeed, I haven't been on an aeroplane for nearly 6 months, which is a record, probably. So I hope you're all well and you're all safe during this horrible pandemic. I don't think I need to introduce myself, really. The name is there, but I am indeed, as Gennady said, one half and the smaller half of, in terms of talent anyway, the writing relationship that Sue and I have for writing Focus. We've been involved as writers and we've been working together as writers for 20 years now. And this recent project, the second edition of Focus, has been a real joy, actually, and I hope that kind of comes through in the materials. So, as Gennady said, later on today at 5 o'clock your time, Sue is going to talk also about some of the aspects of Focus, and she is in particular going to focus on the BBC videos and the use of video, which is a relatively new feature for us. We have a very strong relationship with the BBC, and we're very happy to bring you a lot of footage, and Sue will be going into that and using that in the classroom. I wanted to dig deeper with personalisation because it's such an important strand, it's such an important feature of what we do. It's a kind of thread which runs through, every lesson, every unit, every example, every exercise, talk, task, activity. It's a very strong part of what we do. I also want to make sure that you go away from this with some practical ideas for the classroom. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to take some of the ideas straight into your classroom, even if it's a virtual classroom at the moment. And obviously, I also want to illustrate what I'm saying with some examples from the new edition of Focus. So this is my agenda, 4 points to it. I want to discuss what we can personalize and give some examples with two activities. I want to discuss why we should personalize, giving the arguments for. I then want to sort of counteract that or counterweight that with some challenges that we might have by personalizing material in the classroom. And then I want to finish up by going through some of the examples from Focus where you can see personalisation in action, and how it enhances, we think anyway, the material that we write. Okay, so let's start with a couple of activities. Activity 1, this is called a long turn, and it's at one end of the spectrum. I'm going to do 2 activities. This is the first one, and it's a very, what you might call an extended speaking activity. So what I want you to do is to relax. Are you relaxed? I'm not, but are you relaxed? I hope you are. What I would like to do is to take you back in time and imagine that you were back in the classroom. Now, I realize that this photograph has gone maybe a little bit too far back. This probably represents a period in teaching when, teachers were teachers and students were terrified. So probably not representative of your own experience. But what I would like you to do is I would like you to take a few seconds and to think of the best language teacher you ever had. Now, I'm assuming, as you are all English teachers, that you will have had at least one good language teacher. Hopefully you've had more than one. Maybe they were an English teacher, maybe they were a French teacher or a German teacher or another language teacher. But I'd just like you to, if you can, and please think about the whole of your school career, both primary school, secondary school, and indeed university, if you can. And I'd just like you, in your mind's eye, to just fix on one teacher, okay? One really influential teacher. So this is what I would do in the classroom. I would get the students to think of that one teacher. And then, while you are thinking about that teacher, without writing anything, without saying anything, I would just like you to listen to some questions, and I would like you to answer those questions in your head. So no writing, no speaking, just answer the questions in your head. What was the name of your best ever language teacher? What language did he or she teach? How old were you, or what year were you in when you had this teacher? Now try and remember the classroom or the situation in which you were taught by this teacher. What was the classroom like? Can you remember decoration? Was it big, small, light, airy, stuffy, dark? What was the classroom like, or what was the situation like? Did it smell? Apart from the teacher, who else do you remember in the class? Can you remember who sat next to you? Who sat in front? Who sat behind? Now think about a typical lesson. What happened in a typical lesson taught by this teacher? Did he or she have a particular routine? What would happen in the lesson? And if you had to sum up what was really, really good. What made this particular teacher better and more memorable to you than all the other teachers that you've had? What was special about this particular teacher? And finally, I would ask, are you still in touch with this teacher? Do you know what has happened to this teacher? What do you know? Or is your memory now a distant one and you're no longer in touch? So that would be the way that I would set up this extended speaking activity. It's obviously a very personalized activity. We're asking students to dig deep into their memories, and we're asking them to remember and then talk about a particular person who was important to them in a particular role. I call this a long turn. That is to say that one student would talk about this person, this teacher, for maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 minutes if you're lucky. And the other student, so they're in pairs, and the other student would listen and look interested. And then the roles would be reversed. Now in the classroom, after that preparation of dragging the memory up, I would also ask the students to spend a few minutes thinking about any language that they need, okay? Particular language that they might need to describe the classroom maybe, or to describe the teacher, the teacher's clothes, or what the teacher did, okay? So I would, as well as give them an opportunity to remember this teacher, I would also give them some time to think about certain structures, certain vocabulary, certain lexical items they might need to actually talk about this teacher. And then I would ask the students to talk to each other about the teacher, and my role at that point would be to go around and get feedback, listen to students and note down any issues, any problems, any breakdowns in communication. Now, we'll go into, very briefly, later on in my session today, we'll go into the setup of that particular activity. But just for the moment, I'd like you to remember it as a simple, but very, very effective and very powerful extended speaking activity. And indeed, I would just like to say that in previous sessions where I've done this in the classroom, and maybe I can ask you just to get some interaction, if you had to choose an adjective for this particular teacher, one adjective or 2 adjectives that sum them up, what would you put? Okay, let's see if I can see any in the chat box. Perfect, smart, inventive, helpful, positive, friendly, interesting, modern, skillful, okay, creative. It's very interesting, inspiring. I think that is a spelling mistake there, right? You go to the back of the class. Just joking. Charming, professional. Okay, professional. Very interesting. You see, I do this every time. And what's interesting, and it's pertinent to what I want to talk about today, is people describe the human qualities of the teacher, not necessarily the professional qualities. And I think that's really important in terms of what we're discussing today, which is about personalization. So in previous sessions, I've had some of the things that you've said. Kind-hearted, that's a lovely one. I've had empathetic, I've had inspiring, fun, kind, sexy, patient, good atmosphere, creating a good atmosphere. So lots of things that you've said. But here we've got professional, that's interesting. I've had knowledgeable, I've had organized, okay? Students, appreciate. So there are some elements, if you like, of the professional side of a teacher that people remember. But by far the most, the biggest part of their memory is about their humanness, about their ability to connect because of them being a fantastically rounded human being. And I think that's really important. It's usually the human qualities that people remember about good teachers rather than the specifically narrow professional qualities. We'll come back to that point as well. But now I'd like to do the second activity. And I know this is difficult because we can't interact at the moment, but you can humor me by imagining we're in the classroom or we're in a two-way virtual situation. I've been doing a lot of teaching on Zoom, and I imagine some of you may have been using that too. But let's go to the second activity. Now, this is a very different activity at a completely different end of the scale. This is a dictation. So staying with the theme of days gone by with terrified students, I would like to very briefly give you a dictation. I would like you to do this, okay? So if you've got don't do it in the chat box, but if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil or a notebook or something, I would actually like you to write this down, okay? So 5 sentences. I'm going to dictate them to you now. Number 1. My name is Vaughan. It means little one in ancient Welsh. My name is Vaughan. It means little one in ancient Welsh. Number 2. I was born in Nottingham in 1960. I was born in Nottingham in 1960. Number 3. I've been a teacher for over 35 years. I've been a teacher for over 35 years. Number 4. I'm feeling a little nervous today. I'm feeling a little nervous today. And number 5, if I wasn't here, or if I weren't here, you decide. If I wasn't here, if I weren't here, I'd be doing this session live somewhere in Ukraine. So if I wasn't here or if I weren't here, I'd be doing this session live somewhere in Ukraine. So those are 5 sentences. Now, if you were looking at that with your teacher hat on, what do you think? So somebody's already put different grammar tenses and conditionals, second conditionals. Exactly. It's actually a tense review. Okay, if you look at the language in blue, we've got a present tense, we've got the present tense of to be, the present tense of a regular verb, well, actually an irregular verb. We've got a passive past, okay? We've got a present perfect, we've got a present continuous, and we've got a second conditional. Goodness me, whatever that is. So it's not difficult to look at a piece of language and to find a linguistic objective. And in this case, maybe it's a good linguistic objective, possibly at the beginning of a course, at the beginning of a term, at the beginning of a school year, to do something like this, which reviews the main tenses that the students might do. So that's very controlled English. But the difference here is that we have an element of personalisation. And the personalisation is true information about me, okay? And the second part of this activity would be, once we've looked at these sentences, we've maybe identified the tenses, and we've looked at maybe other examples of these tenses, then we go back to this activity and I ask you, the students, to change the words in orange and change them to make the sentences true for you. So again, just 20 seconds, 22.3 seconds. Can you just do that in your head? Can you see how you do that? Oh, I see I have a grammar question here in the chat box. Don't trust anybody would be my answer to that. Okay, so hopefully you would be able to, if you were students, if you were in my class, to relatively easily change these sentences so that they were all true for you. And that would make them meaningful, doubly meaningful. Meaningful me, because I am presenting myself, and meaningful for you. And then you might swap papers, or you might compare papers and see how similar or different you are to the person next to you. It's a very simple activity, but there's a lot going on. Obviously, and I'll come to this later in the session, if you have known each other for ages, then you might not want to exchange obvious information. So maybe you could change this slightly, and one of the sentences, you make it false. And then your partner, their job is to find out which one, or to try to guess which is the false piece of information. So there are ways of making it challenging, if you like, or more challenging, or less challenging, or more meaningful in situations where students know each other extremely well. And we will come back to that point, because that is important. But really, the main reason to start with these two activities is to show you that whether you are at the very free end of teaching, where you're getting students to talk at length about something, or whether you're at the very controlled end of teaching, where you are practicing grammar structures or particular vocabulary or something like that, or functions, you can make things personalizable. You can bring in personalization. It is possible. And I think it's something that you should definitely be thinking about doing. Why? This is the next question. Why bother? Okay. Now, I apologize for the next slide, because I'm sure I've shown it. I show it every session I ever do, because I've never found a better one to succinctly summarize what I think about teaching and learning. And this is going to come to the answer to this question. So I'm sure, I apologize if you've seen this already, but I love this. I'm never tired of seeing it. And of course, it sums up the rather difficult and misunderstood and mystifying relationship between teaching and learning. What we teach, the students don't necessarily learn. So apologies if you've seen this already, but I think it was worth showing one more time. And it's an important point. There's no doubt that we must always be bearing this in mind. But what we believe very strongly, and this is part and parcel of another thing which you probably know from me, the so-called 3 M's, we believe that if teaching and learning are to be effective, then our job is to worry as teachers about how we motivate our students, how we help our students memorize things, and how we pay attention to meaning all the time that we're teaching. And so I want to look at those 3 M's through the focus, if you like, or through the lens of personalization. This is a definition by Scott Thornberry, one of my great influencers. He simply says, personalization, when you personalize language, you use it to talk about your knowledge, your experience, and your feelings. Very simple definition. But he goes on in the thing, and he talks about, if you were talking to a Cartesian about learning a language, they might say, I think, therefore I learn. So think only cerebral. Okay, so the sort of intelligence side. Whereas if you were talking to a humanist, the humanistic perspective would be, I think, I feel, I desire, therefore I learn. So it's a more whole experience. And this is something which I very much adhere to and very much feel part of the sort of humanistic tradition of learning language. Talk about the whole person, not just the bit of their brain which is to do with language. And if we look at these three M's, which are the building blocks of the material which we've built up and written over the years, looking at motivation, for example, well, when you personalize something, it's relevant. What you're trying to do is relevant to the class. It's interesting, and it creates a sense of solidarity that we're all in this together. So it's not remote. It's not about somebody, what I often call Tom, Dick, and Harry people. So people who the students have never met and never likely to met. Often people who don't even exist. They only exist in the minds of the writers. So in terms of motivation, I think personalization is a very obvious and strong advantage. Secondly, with memory, sadly some of this has fallen off here, but it's interesting, and there's been quite a bit of research done about this, about the so-called self-reference effect. It helps memory. In fact, I was reading something recent. I was reading something recently, which was actually published several years ago. It was called Memory Enhancement in Language Pedagogy. And if I just quote from some research which a guy called Farzad Sharifian did back in the early 2000s, he says, free recall of linguistic items is superior when those items have been processed with reference to the self rather than others or other things. And he goes on to say, the self-reference effect can best be employed in developing materials and exercises for language learners. Well, that's exactly what Sue and I try to do in our work. And there's a very clear and obvious advantage to it. It extends or deepens the cognitive depth. And there's an element of surprise, which is also fun and important. But essentially, when we're learning something, whether it be a language or whether it be anything, what we are trying to do, or what, was it Aristotle? I get them mixed up, who said learning is remembering. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create as many connections in the brain as we possibly can. So if we are personalizing things, then we are tapping into all sorts of other areas of the brain rather than just learning it as some kind of logic puzzle. So anything that gets personalized affects the affective side of the brain, as well as the more sort of instrumental side of the brain. So it's really important to try and create as many connections as we can. The more connections you create, the more likely you are to remember, the more likely you are to learn. So this is really important. And then I would also say, with meaning, it's pretty self-evident that if you are learning through the lens of personalization, if you're personalizing material, then we're talking about the truth. It's not made up, it's based in reality, and you are creating genuine, maybe weird, maybe bizarre, but you are creating genuine exchanges between the students rather than sort of play acting all the time. So I think that's fairly obvious. And as I said, it's very much at the heart of the humanist approach, or the humanist tradition. Here are two quotes which I'll let you read for yourselves, but I wholeheartedly believe in this kind of approach. Now, these guys were writing, well, in Earl Stevick's case, before computers, let alone before virtual learning. But I think, you can still, it's more difficult, but I've tried it over the last month, as I'm sure you have. It's still possible to create a good atmosphere in the virtual classroom, and create good relationships between people in the virtual classroom. Definitely more difficult, but it's definitely possible. So these are building blocks for me, and I don't mind admitting I'm a card-carrying enthusiast of the humanistic approach to language learning. I believe it's all about the relationships created between human beings, not just language learners. I'm a language learner in a human form, and so I'm a human being first and foremost. And I think that everything that we do, the whole person has to be taken into account. And this is why personalization is such a strong feature and such a powerful tool that we have at our disposal. Having said that, obviously, there are challenges, and I'd like to move on to 3 challenges that I have identified over the years. I'm sure there are more, but there are 3 that I'd like to focus on today. Now, again, apologies if I've already told this apocryphal story before in one of my sessions in Ukraine, but I want you to imagine a teacher who is starting the class, and the subject of the class, for example, could be from focus here, could be good health, okay? And this teacher, rather ill-advisedly possibly, starts off by saying, right, have any of you ever had an accident? And the students sort of look at each other, and then somebody at the back says, yes, last year I break my leg. And the teacher says, break? And the student says, yes, last year, a terrible car accident, I break my leg. And the teacher says, break? And the student says, yes, last year, terrible car accident, I broke my leg in 3 places. And the teacher says, good. Okay, joke. Difficult to do a joke on the screen, but anyway, you see the idea. Lol. I get lol from Tatiana. Thank you very much. I think it is that. I can't even read Russian, but never mind. The point is, and this is a really important challenge, it is, you got it, that's good to know. The point is that sometimes don't listen to what I say, listen to what I mean. Now, obviously, we are language teachers. So obviously, part of our job is to correct our students. And in many contexts and many situations, that's what you should do, obviously. So I'm not saying don't correct your students, but I am saying that occasionally a student is really trying to mean, but they just get the words wrong, or they get the tense wrong, or whatever it is. So by all means, scaffold them, by all means, help them, but first and foremost, treat them as human beings and understand them. And then you can work on, improving the accuracy later on. This is really, really important. I mean, I'm sure you've had teachers like this, or even people like this, who you're speaking very good English, as I'm sure all of you do, and you'll get somebody who corrects you constantly. I mean, I speak pretty good French, I speak pretty good Spanish, and, I might be in a bar, well, not these days, but I might have been in a bar in Spain chatting to some Spanish friend about something that's really important to me, maybe really personal to me, whatever. And even though I'm pouring my heart out, this person is correcting my Spanish. It's like, stop, just listen to me. Listen to what I'm trying to say. Stop making me feel insignificant because my Spanish isn't perfect. So I'm sure we've all had those kind of experiences. And I think the students will feel that as well. Of course, most students come to class and they want to be corrected. And there is a time and a place, and I'm not saying don't correct, obviously. But occasionally, importantly, judge when it is the right moment to correct and when it is the right moment just to listen, to make a mental note, and maybe to correct later on. And I think that's important. You want to be listening to students as human beings first and as language learners second in certain contexts. Okay, so that's important. But that's the first challenge about personalization. When you get students talking a lot about themselves, they might come out with all sorts of wrong English, and you just need to be careful about when you correct them. The second thing is possibly the more obvious criticism, which is often leveled at personalization or too much personalization. Have a look at this exercise. Ask the students to do it. Then ask them to ask each other these questions. How comfortable would you be with this material? Not very. Not comfortable at all. Yeah, exactly. So obviously, as somebody's just said, way too personal, okay? You can't ask people in the class to talk about how many partners they've had, obviously. I mean, I get embarrassed if my wife asks me that. Okay, so, you know, you have to be sensible about what you can and can't get the students to reveal in the classroom. And as I say, it's an easy criticism to level at teachers or writers such as myself who want to include lots of personalization in the class. But I say this, it's just common sense. You know your students. You know what you can and can't use in your class. You know that, you know, the last thing you want is to make your students feel uncomfortable. So just don't do it. It's up to you. You're the teacher. You're the person who understands your students. This is not what we want, okay? So that kind of activity is completely, absolutely not to be used, okay? And indeed, things will depend on the class you have. All of us, I'm sure, have taught all sorts of different classes. In some cases, you can barely talk about anything personal because they feel, oh, they don't want to reveal. And in other classes, you can talk about almost anything. So it depends. It's on a scale. There's no hard and fast rules. You, the teacher, should decide. And you are the person who should control how much personalization or how little personalization you use in the classroom. I would just say, with this particular activity, a way in which you could, I'm not saying you should, a way in which you could use it. For example, how about this? So rewrite the questions in the correct order, and then in groups, and the students are maybe in pairs or groups of 3, discuss in which situations it might be okay to ask each question. So here we're removing them personally from the situation, and we're asking them to imagine situations in which questions like this might be okay. Yeah. You know, how old are you? Well, that would be somebody like a doctor and a patient. That could be that situation. Do you believe in God? two very, very good friends potentially. That's a difficult one. How much do you weigh? Well, again, a doctor might ask you that question, and that would be okay in that context. Have you ever broken the law? Maybe a police officer might ask you that. But you know what I mean? You don't have to, but you could use those questions in a different way by not asking the students to reveal anything about themselves, but just to imagine situations in which those questions might be okay. All right, so that's the second challenging thing, going too personal. We are teachers, we're not psychiatrists, okay? So know your students and know how much personalization they are comfortable with, and don't go beyond that, okay? So that's really important. And the last one, very quickly, is the issue of students knowing each other so well that you start asking them questions like practicing English, where do you live? And the person said, well, you know where I live. I've lived next to you for 15 years. I've lived next to you for my whole life. So those are situations in which you need to try and avoid. This is a expression which we have in English, probably you have it in Ukraine as well. Too much familiarity breeds contempt. So when you ask ridiculous questions that you already know the answer to, that's horrible in an English language classroom. I know it has to happen sometimes, and I know we have to play act sometimes, but if you can, try to avoid personalization where the questions or the topic is something that the students already know about each other, because there's no point. There's no genuine information exchange there. So you can just tweak things a little bit, like I did earlier, where instead of 5 true questions, maybe one of them is false, and I have to guess which one is false. There are ways in which you can make relatively simple questions a bit more difficult and get a genuine exchange. So those are the 3 challenges, I would say, to introducing personalization or more personalization into your classrooms. One is the issue of listening to the students, listen to what they mean sometimes rather than just what they say. So listen to what they're saying rather than just how they say it. The second one is don't go too personal. Absolutely not. That is a complete no-no. And the third one is try to avoid situations where the students are asking and answering questions about each other that they already know the answers to. It's pointless. All right. So finally, for the last 10 minutes, I would just like to give you some examples of how can we personalize, how we can personalize material. And these are examples from Focus. Just very quickly, and it's something that some of you may have seen at a session I did in Ukraine, I'd like to go back to the long turn and just go through how you set that up, because it's important to have the stages there. So this is how I do this, talking about our favorite teacher, as we did at the beginning. First of all, it could be your favorite teacher, it could be anybody, but you choose topics that everybody can relate to. So if you believe, as I very strongly do, that the most important, the most valuable resource that you have in your classroom is the students themselves, their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, etc., what they bring into the classroom, then you need to find topics that they can all relate to. So you need to identify topics that belong to their life experience. So, for example, tell me about the last time you went abroad. Well, that might not work in a class, because in a class of, 20, 30, maybe only 5 people have been abroad. Or tell me about the last time you went to London. That would be even more ridiculous. Maybe only 1 person in the class has been to London. So you just need to think carefully about a topic that everybody can relate to. And in terms of having the topic I gave you, which was your best ever teacher, I was pretty sure, you can never be totally sure, but I was pretty sure that most of you will have had a decent teacher, at least one decent teacher, at some time in your language learning journey. So I was confident that that was a topic that you could all talk about. So that's the first thing. Choose a topic, a topic that's relevant. The second thing is allowing sufficient preparation time, allowing students to remember. Okay, that's why I did all of those questions gently at the beginning, and then to think about the language. So preparation time is also key. You can't expect students to just jump into the activity. They need time to think. Thirdly, make sure you monitor the students and give them feedback, maybe immediate feedback or maybe feedback as a class the next day. Give them opportunities to listen to other speakers, possibly yourself is the most useful person, but other teachers potentially, something online, something you see doing the same thing. And the fifth is the absolutely key point, which is to allow the students to do the same long turn with a new partner at a different moment. Maybe the next lesson, maybe a week from now, maybe 3 weeks from now. And this is something which this is called in the jargon, task repetition. It's really, really important. It's really strong. And it's based on this sort of very well-known phenomenon, which is if you take a joke, for example, or a story, when you tell it for the first time, maybe you don't tell it very well. Maybe nobody laughs. Okay, maybe you, like my mother, you tell the punchline first, in which case everybody knows what the point of the joke is and nobody laughs at all. The second time you tell it better. The third time you tell it even better. The fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time. People have their set pieces. They have their little thing that happened to them on holiday, the jokes maybe. And it's through practice that we perfect. And this is the same for in the class. So when the students have done something like this, when they've talked about their favorite teacher, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that you get them to talk about their favorite teacher, that could be dangerous, but when they've talked about a memorable day they've had or their last birthday or whatever it is, don't leave it there. Do it. And then bring it back and create a situation where they do it again. Not to the same partner, obviously. You know, have I ever told you about my last birthday? Yes, 10 times. We don't want that, okay? So forget that. What we do want is we want students to have the possibility of speaking at length several times about the same topic. And each time they improve. They improve in terms of accuracy, they improve in terms of fluency, and they move their English onto a new level. Okay, they increase or they use more complex, more challenging language. So this is something which I would, if you take anything away from this webinar, I would like you to try this particular activity in your classes. Okay, let's just quickly go through. I'm realizing it's moving towards 2 o'clock, but hopefully 5 minutes or so, just to go through some of the other things. This sort of methodology here, if you like, finds itself in focus. We've got examples in focus 2, examples in focus 4. I was trying to look. We've got them anyway. So here the students are telling a story. Here they're talking about a personal anecdote. Often these, but the methodology which I just explained here, this is part and parcel of these lessons. Here they're talking about a memorable day. Here they are talking about a dangerous situation or a mistake they've made, or good or bad news they've had, a nice surprise, a holiday. Obviously, giving them various possibilities is a good idea. I would then like to, as I did earlier, go to the other end of our teaching, which is the sort of nitty-gritty controlled practice, grammar practice end. And I'd like you to consider this. 2 exercises here. One is from a book, which I'm not going to identify, and the other one is from focus. And the point, the grammar point, is the difference between the present simple and the present continuous. Okay? So here, this is practice. In fact, it's testing. But let's look at it. The kind of general topic is clothes. Okay? Which is meaningful and which is meaningless? Meaningful, green. Meaningless, blue. So I hope I haven't given you enough time really, but I hope you can see the important difference between these two example exercises. They're both genuine. The one on your left, the green one, the green box, I don't know if that's your left or my left. Anyway, the green box is from focus. And the blue box is from AN other book. And the problem with the one on the right, the blue box, is the issue of meaning through personalisation. So it says, complete the sentences using the correct form of the verb in brackets. I don't understand this question. Well, is that true? If it was true, you wouldn't get it right because you wouldn't understand, you wouldn't even start. Tess, who's Tess? Tess hopes that people like her designs. All right. Please be quiet. I'm working. You're learning about ethical fashion at the moment. You're learning. You learn. You're learning. And the last one, 5, Maria. Who's Maria? No idea. But Maria wears cool silver earrings, is perfectly fine. And Maria is wearing cool silver earrings, is also fine. So that's not even a good grammar question because it's ambiguous. Both are possible. You know, Maria wears cool silver earrings every day, and Maria is wearing cool silver earrings now. So it's not even good from a grammatical perspective, let alone a meaning perspective. And what I hope you can see is that the activity on the left, not fantastic, obviously, but at least it addresses grammatical points and meaning points, and it does it through personalization. So the students choose an affirmative or negative form of the verb in brackets, depending on the truth. So I need or I don't need a new pair of trainers. They have to think about the meaning as well as the grammar. I am wearing, I'm not wearing my favorite t-shirt today. Meaning and grammar. Okay, and you can see that. And the other thing about this is if you take it to its conclusion, we then have the possibility of doing much more with this little exercise. Ask each other questions based on the sentences above. So here we're manipulating the grammar. Do you need a new pair of trainers? Are you wearing your favorite t-shirt today? Okay, so these are very hard-working. The green exercises are what we call, Sue and I call, hard-working exercises, okay? They're full of meaning. I know they're a bit silly, but they're full of meaning. They practice the grammar, and they practice all bits of the grammar. So here we have negative, affirmative, and interrogative practice, and in very little space compared to the, I would say, rather impoverished examples exercise in blue. So that's a very sharp distinction I'm making between the kind of materials that we're not the only people who do this, of course, but the kind of material that we believe in and that we write, and the kind of material which often we have to deal with, and I have dealt with over the years. And I know that obviously in Ukraine there's no I can't say that. There's no preparatory exam is very, very, very important. And so we do have in the new version of Focus, we do have a use of English. I can't get that in there. That's right. There we are. A use of English spread in each of the units, which is to give extra practice for exam type activities. But even there, as you can see here, you can do it so that it is personalizable. So here, this particular use of English is on collocations. This is quite a high level. This is level 4. And so, we've got these sentences, typical Snow type multiple choice activity. Dad says it's important to set what? Standards. Fine standards, tall standards, high standards, big standards. Okay. So the students would choose. I can't remember if Snow has 3 choices or 4 choices. Anyway, it's a typical multiple choice type thing. So Dad says it's important to set high standards for yourself. Next one. My sister has a vivid, detailed, sharp, strong imagination. Vivid imagination. Obviously, all of these words are in context in the lesson. So this is a sort of test and practice of the lesson. But what I'm trying to suggest to you is that it's possible to, even when you're doing exam practice, it's possible to make things personalizable, because what happens at the end of this is you ask each other which sentences are true for you. So is it true that your dad says it's important to set high standards? Is it true that your sister has a vivid imagination? I don't have a sister. Fine. Okay, fine. Whatever. Is it true that the last film you saw was rubbish? You were bitterly disappointed, etc., etc. Okay, so there are ways of making even very, very specifically exam-oriented exercises personalizable, and we try to do that wherever possible. I'll just go through these very quickly. I think best really is if I just go through these quickly, because you can ask Internal, for example, copies of the book and find them out for yourself. But that's that was from Focus 4. This one's from Focus 3. We still have, and I'm very proud to say that we still have the word store, which is an important feature of the book, and the important emphasis on vocabulary, which we still very much believe in. So this particular one that I'm showing you is this spread here. So you've got the word store there. This is to do with parts of the body. It's a bit of fun, actually. Here you test your partner's physical abilities. You find out what your partner can do. Can you touch your left ankle with your chin? Okay, so they use these new, rather higher level words. Can you touch your right thigh with your elbow? I can just about manage that. Okay, so a bit of fun with these things. So that's still personalization and a bit of fun. And then this is something, again, you've got the BBC link each time to really some very lovely clips from the BBC to go with the materials. This is well-being, which I think we all have to think about at the moment. And I just wanted to finish by just showing you the very typical types of exercise which we do in this particular context is the vocabulary. So here, okay, so this is all come from here. It's all about health and well-being. This is the vocabulary which we are teaching, and this is the way we do it. The vocabulary typically in 3 instances is contextualized in the original spread, and these exercises are down the right hand side, and they correspond to the vocab in the back or in the word store. So here we have one. Okay, complete this with the words in red. Choose the correct option, then ask and answer the question. So when was the last time you felt ill? Felt runny? No, that's wrong. So they get the correct one, felt ill, and then they ask each other the questions. The next one, so ask each other the questions. The second one, discuss whether you agree or disagree with the statements. So they match some sentence halves, and then they agree or disagree with those statements. And the third one, are they true for you, or make them true for you? So these are instructions or rubrics which we use quite frequently, and they are a really good. They're not the only ones we use, but they are the ones which we find we turn to time and time again. So are the sentences true for you or your partner? Complete the sentences so they are true for you or for your partner. Change the names to make sentences true for people you know. So that's all about true. If the sentences or the questions are in the form of interrogatives, questions, then ask and answer those questions. And then slightly more removed, make some statements with the language that you're targeting. And then do you agree or disagree? So try to make those statements quite polemical so that there can be a discussion, discussing things in pairs. So those are not the only ones, but those are the very common types of instruction that we can use to make your students use personalization and hopefully enrich the classroom. And I'd like to finish by giving you another quote, this time from one of the leading lights in the humanistic tradition, Gertrude Moscovich, who in 1978, would you believe, in a wonderful book, which is still relevant today, called Caring and Sharing in the Foreign Class, this was her summing up of the need for personalization. And I'll leave that with you for 20 seconds. So essentially what she's saying is that, start with the students first and then transfer to the textbook. Hopefully, if you're using Focus, the textbook will help you do that. But as I've already said, probably at least twice, it's the students who are the most important and the richest resource in your classes. So anything you can do using a book such as Focus, where you're following a carefully controlled syllabus and you're teaching the various structures, the various functions, the various pronunciation, the various vocabulary items in a structured way. If you can do that through personalization, then I believe that your classes will be much richer and much more interesting and much more memorable. And you will be one of these teachers that your students remember when they are your age, looking back on their school careers. So I have some homework, further reading for you, but I'd just like at this point to say thank you very much for listening, and hand over to Gennady, I think, for potential questions and answers, if there are, maybe 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so Gennady said he's just going to throw up some of the questions that I was asked. Thank you. Very kind. So just a few questions. Could you answer, please, whether you feel that online teaching is harder, more energy consuming than offline? Oh, well, there's a good question. Physically, this is my experience, and I'm sure everybody's had their own. Physically, it's not as hard. Clearly, I'm sitting down. Sometimes I stand up, but mainly I'm sitting down. As you probably already know, if you've seen me in person, I'm quite an energetic teacher. So in terms of sort of physical energy, teaching in the classroom definitely takes up more energy than me. It's more energy consuming than me. But mentally, I do find that's probably just my age and stage. I do find sometimes the complexity of using things like Zoom And I've been using Edmodo, which is a wonderful learner management system. I do find the screens open and are people listening, and have I got the right thing on the screen? I find that a little bit mentally challenging sometimes. I hope that's an answer for you. Do you have another question? Well, there's quite a big difference between. We hope both editions are good. Obviously, we've had a chance to update quite a lot of things. As I said, as part of my presentation today, we have a brand new section in the in the different levels. This is level 2. It's the use of English. Okay, so that's a completely new section, which is very focused on specifically exam in the case of Ukraine's no preparation. Obviously, the addition of video, the BBC videos in particular, and we do also have other Vox Pops type videos. So there's another element, if you like, to teaching. I think the digital offering has improved. All of the vocabulary spreads have been completely rewritten, and all of the reading spreads have been completely rewritten. As I say, new use of English, new. So yeah, it's not 100% new, but it's, I don't know, 60-70% new. There's a lot of new material. Okay. For B2 in Focus 5, yes, I think probably Focus 5 could even go higher than B2, but yes, it is sort of, B2 is a tricky one. It's in between Focus 4 and Focus 5, but yes, I think the answer to that is yes. What way do you motivate your students to learn? Oh. What I just said the last hour. How personally? Oh, very personal. I feel that, you know, if I am asking my students to talk about themselves, then I clearly have to talk about myself as well. So that's important, very important. Thank you very much. All right, you're very welcome. I'm very pleased that it went well. It's so sad that I can't interact with you and I can't see you and I can't go for a drink or for a meal with you now. But I'm pleased that you've got something out of this, and may I please invite you to tune in at 5 o'clock Ukraine time to listen to my great friend and writing partner, Suke. Okay, bye.
Because, sure. Well, we'd like to thank you very much from the whole team here at Untitled Education for joining us, for being still with us, even if you're not able to do that physically because of some, well, obvious circumstances. We are very, very glad to have you here and talk exclusively to the teachers of Ukraine. And I think now, well, all the colleagues here, all the teachers of English know that when working with Focus, their students would personalize the content of the book, and that they're going to be even more motivated than they probably used to be before that. So thank you very much for that again. Sure. And just again to remind, dear colleagues, you obviously expect a certificate for the webinar, so please wait for it during the next week. And here again, the QR code and the link to the landing page for all the seminars and for all the webinars that are happening these days. Please share the link with your colleagues who probably might have missed this session because they still can join Vaughan tomorrow. However, it's going to be later here at 5 p.m. So if they didn't have time today at 3, Vaughan is going, and we are going to be really, really happy to see you tomorrow as well. And please join our social media on Facebook and Instagram too. So Vaughan, again, thank you very much for being with us, for sharing your valuable experience, and for your care in the students to stay motivated, and for writing such a wonderful second edition of Focus.
Thank you. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Yes. Okay, guys. See you later. Vaughan, see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.